Greg Sankey, SEC Commissioner, kind enough to join us. Been kind of busy here in the off season. Never stops for you. Recap what happened last week. Give me the Cliff Notes version.
Spent a lot of time in overly air-conditioned meeting rooms in Destin, Florida, with athletics directors, head coaches, football, men's and women's basketball, and our presidents and chancellors. Talked about our football schedule, the college football playoff, potential settlement of a set of lawsuits that would introduce a revenue sharing model to college sports. And we talked about any other number of issues like our softball tournament location that are probably more mundane than you want to jump into on a Monday morning.
All
But
right.
I'm happy to talk about softball and gymnastics championships locations for the conference if you'd like.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, but let's get some of these ancillary things out of the way.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay. Let me start with basketball, and then we'll get to football. The discussions of 72, 76 teams, any discussion from the SEC portion of this?
I introduced the issue to our men's basketball coaches, which I think we've talked about with that group before. I would guess, Dan, given the other issues we have on our plate, that conversation maybe lasted 5 minutes. My points to them were, this is still a work in progress. I didn't know that there was going to be kind of a press gathering, and this is not a criticism. Charlie Baker spoke about tournament expansion, I think the day after our basketball coaches gathered. I mentioned it to our women's basketball coaches as well briefly, didn't really go anywhere. And so my introduction was, I just want you to be aware, probably towards the end of the month, this will come up. I said, my view is, I think we should be exploring tournament expansion. Whether or not it happens is actually another point of evaluation. So have the conversation, deep dive, figure out if it works practically, competitively, economically. I think the one issue for us is, if it is expanded, let's pick the number of 76, and I'll do quick math for you. So 52 of the 76 teams would be like in that traditional first round. The other 24 would play in 12 games. The 12 winners meet up with the 52. There's your 64 team bracket, right? That's like from my intramural director days at Utica College. That's how I know how brackets work. I'm really interested, and we're interested in a league, is who fills those 12 games, those other 24 teams. So the kind of Dayton model, if you will, which is a men's basketball side, is it's a combination of the lowest AQs, the lowest rated AQs, kind of by placement of the committee, and then the last at-large teams in. And I kind of pivot to look to North Carolina State last year, 11 seed. They were an AQ, but they went to the Final Four. And it's just kind of an indication that competitively, those top 50 or so teams, things fall right, injuries heal, can make really good runs. So I'm not one who thinks we should just follow the Dayton model automatically if expansion takes place. So that was my reference to our coaches.
When are decisions made or voted on for expansion for the college football playoffs?
That's a good question. By agreement, the outer boundary is November 30, December 1 of this year for the 26 playoff. Now, keep in mind, when we went to 12 teams, the board said that'll be the format for 2026. Let's start early if we can, which we obviously did, and I think did overall in a successful way. But what was introduced immediately is, let's go through these 2 years and conduct an evaluation. So we're in that evaluation standpoint. A lot of talk about really 14 or 16. I think 12 is known as kind of a foundation point, but the conversation is about 14 or 16, and then how our teams selected or place into whatever size bracket exists is the headline question.
Okay, but what model do you like?
Well, I've been one who said over time, I'd give no allocation. So this whole 5-7 thing that exists now, I just make it the 12 best teams. And I was clear on that. Now, when we get into rooms, we make political compromises, if you will, small p, not like Congress political compromises, but to achieve an outcome.
But who decides on the top 12 teams?
Selection committee. Yeah. But here's what I think. I think we've not we spent so much time expanding and working through our own little side arguments about teams and, oh, we can't do this, we need this, you got to protect this bowl game or that bowl game. We never went back to the essence of decision making, which is how our team selected. As everyone relocated over the last 4 or 5 years, do the analyses that existed and worked for the 14 playoff in 2014 still have the same relevance? And we're behind that curve, in my opinion. That's why other ideas are introduced and considered. And we've looked at ideas, this allocation of, it's called automatic bids. That's such a harsh term. I think allocations is one where I like that word, because we already allocated. And look at last year. We had 2 teams not in the top 4 that get to move up because of the political compromise. We have a team outside the 12 that moves in, and then the teams that are displaced look around and say, hey, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense any longer. That introduces the questions around, should that model continue, or should that allocation model expand where other teams are brought in?
Talking to Greg Sankey, SEC Commissioner. We've talked about this before. Given the scheduling and hotel rooms and travel of reseeding after the first round of games, is that on the table at all anymore?
Well, not really reseeding, because almost, a week and a half ago, for the 25 season, this College Football Playoff Management Committee, which is the commissioners and the Notre Dame athletic director, agreed to just go to straight seeding by ranking. So the movement of teams outside the top 4 into the top 4, that won't happen in 2025. You're gonna get what you earn. Same for home games. We've not gone back into the reseeding question. And Dan, if you go back to June of 21, which was like ancient history in college sports, when the 12-team model was introduced, and we went back through this about a month ago with everybody involved on that management committee. One of the questions was, should we be in reseeding? We never really got back to that, because you remember the SEC had this little expansion to 16, great disruption in the force. Then we had 22, an expansion of the Big Ten. So we waited around for a year, and now we've been in hurry up mode since. So we haven't talked so much about reseeding as we did just about honoring the rankings in the bracket.
Help me understand, the report on Cooper Flagg is he made close to $30 million his 1 year at Duke. That's NIL. Help me understand, as the athlete moves forward, of the salaries and NIL and any restrictions, any compromises that will be there for these, that's marquee athletes, let's call them.
Without commenting on the Cooper Flagg story, I haven't seen that, and nobody's sending me financial documents to verify, as you can imagine, in this environment. A couple points. One is this settlement that's positioned in a set of lawsuits has great impact on the answer to your question. If the settlement is approved for the first time at the college level, and really quite innovative in the sports realm, would be the process for overseeing third-party name, image, and likeness to establish there's an appropriate range of compensation and fair market and real business purposes fulfill around name, image, and likeness deals. That's not like novel. It just hasn't existed as we've gone on this state-by-state exploration of kind of reducing any regulatory system for college sports NIL. So I think that's a first step. And that's one component, third-party name, image, and likeness. The second is what I think will be kind of a name, image, and likeness activity within a revenue-sharing model where athletic programs are providing that payment directly to student athletes. Okay. That can be a better system. There has to be a commitment to make it work. And I still am one who thinks the notion of having 50 different state laws governing is highly problematic. You're not going to have College World Series. You can't run Final Fours and national championships that way. You run something more like high school championships where every state kind of walls off and establishes its own rules. And I think that has to be understood as a significant point of concern. That's why the return of national standards in the congressional conversation still has meaning.
What would stop me as a businessman if I wanted the top quarterback in college football to come to Alabama and I want to give him $25 million a year?
Right now, there hasn't been a lot as the states migrate away from any oversight of their own laws or any regulation. If the settlement is approved, I'll go back to that third party oversight. And it would depend on your classification, assuming you have some affiliation, you've provided money, donations to the university involved, you then kick into this third party NIL oversight and the ability for somebody to be deemed at an appropriate real business purpose and range of compensation level would be involved. And if it doesn't, there'll be an opportunity to adjust your offer.
I would love for conferences, or maybe there's somebody who can be, like the NFL has somebody who does the scheduling. Like I would love, we might lose Notre Dame and USC. Like I don't know, maybe I'm the get off my lawn, the old guy, but, can you come up with scheduling that we don't lose Texas versus Oklahoma or whatever, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, I should say. Like, I don't want to lose these. We don't have many left. And I don't know if college football could ever have a schedule overseer. So we do have marquee matchups. This is entertainment. It's TV, non-conference. What do you think of that?
I think a couple things. Let's go back to the college football playoff. So I've been the recipient of plenty kind of side comments about good of the game, whatever that means. And when programs, like when Wake Forest notifies Ole Miss the day before their first game of a home and home series that we're not playing the one back in Oxford, that's a problem. When Nebraska cancels an agreement to play Tennessee home and home and cites, and I'm not criticizing their athletic director, this is a reality, cites the college football playoff selection process as a fundamental reason why. We have to understand the college football playoff selection process is threatening the regular season, not supporting it. Remember all those conversations people had about, hey, if you expand the playoff, you're going to diminish the regular season. I think there is something to that. I just think everybody missed that the regular season was being changed by the college football playoff. So point one is, whether people agree or not, I think the first issue that has to be addressed is the selection criteria incentivizing playing these highly competitive, highly desired games, whether that's non-conference or conference. That's one. The second is, I think conferences coming together to facilitate this scheduling is important. And I'll just take ourselves. We facilitate 4 end-of-year non-conference games last week of the season. We've had schools actually leave our league and come back, and we facilitated those games when they've wanted to play. So I think from my perspective, I'm happy for a coordinated conversation to try to get scheduling right. But I do think you have to go back to, at the forefront of everyone's mind is how decisions about the postseason are going to be made. And Dan, that's a point I've made more subtly than of late and more directly in the most recent comments, because I do think that leads the agenda of what must be addressed in college football scheduling, is how this postseason selection guides people's thinking.
Give me the one thing that keeps you up at night that has to do with where we are or where we're headed.
If I could have one thing to keep me up at night, I'd sleep like a baby again. So let's just stipulate that. Like I would be out like a light. I wake up every day on issues around the relationship with our student athletes. And that's both the economic relationship. I'm concerned about the lifelong impact, about the amount of money that flows into somebody's life when the emotional maturity may not be there. How do you go take a $50,000 entry level job, and we run these ads that 98% of the people on the athletic fields or courts or tracks are going pro in something else, and you've had your own personal economics or value inflated? How do you learn those lifelong lessons? I think the transfer environment is linked to that. Perhaps the inability to walk through some of the difficult moments in life. Hey, it's not every transfer is a problematic transfer. And I speak as somebody who transferred a couple of times. So you're trying to figure it out, especially if you're a first generation college student. Like, you don't have somebody pulling you aside and helping you understand, hey, maybe if you stick it out, build your legacy in one place, receive some economic benefit, have educational and relational continuity, you come out is a more prepared adult for what's next in life. The combination of those factors, the economic relationship, the transfer decisions, and then the lifelong impacts that come from that we're not going to know for a while. Those are at the top of what keeps me up at night.
I proposed this, well, to myself, but on my show probably 10 years ago, that if you have players who are coming to school because they think they're going to be a professional athlete, can you have some kind of curriculum that helps them with investing, balancing a checkbook, real estate, taxes, things that have to do that are, the history of Mesopotamia, while I took the course, hasn't helped me today. But if you're taking something that does prepare you, and college is supposed to prepare you. If I go to college and we have, some kind of symbiotic relationship of I'm coming to use you, you're using me, I don't have any interest in staying in school. But can you help them with things that will help them in what they want to do?
A few points. Like I studied the Mesopotamian thing and had the same reaction. Then I went to the British Museum and there's a section on Mesopotamia. And I'm like, hey, I read about this when I was 14 or something like that. That's one. Second, I think if it's only in life, do what you want and not challenge you to broaden your horizons, I think we lose an opportunity to help young people grow. So I would never suggest we just walk away from a broad educational experience. Third, sure, could we pivot? And there are plenty of electives, there are plenty of ways to learn, but our athletics departments provide pretty deep financial literacy programs. In fact, I've debated with current student athletes, like, should I not pay taxes right now on my earnings and wait and pay it at the end of the year and then go into quarterly tax payments for kind of 1099 work so that I can invest that money? I'm talking about 19 and 20-year-olds in business classes and taking financial literacy classes through their athletics department. It's not the lack of provision of education, information, and context. The people involved have to receive that, whether it's Mesopotamia, real estate deals, or how to balance your checkbook. It's not just that the educational opportunity and the information is provided. They have a responsibility to understand. They have to consume that information, internalize it, and use it. And I would say, too, for the people around the student athlete, for the young person involved in college athletics, the notion that what's happening around NIL payments just continues all the way through life, I think can be kind of a perceived pot of gold at the end of a rainbow that is just going to continue. And I think we all know that hard work, dedication, perseverance, taking a risk here and there, betting on yourself, those are the things through the next 40 years of life that set you up for success, not that defined area between 18 and 22. In fact, there's a John Grisham novel called Bleachers about a high school football player, and I'll paraphrase one of the lines in this novel, and hey, it's a novel, but it's pretty wise, which is the worst thing that can happen to somebody is they become the biggest deal ever when they're 18 or 19 years old, because there's a whole lifetime ahead of you.
Big 12 ACC commissioners on your Christmas card list? You guys don't okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, disagreement's fine. Like one of my great conversations a month ago, Roy Kramer, who was SEC commissioner number 6, was telling me stories about going to meetings with Jim Delaney and Tom Hansen, who was the Pac-12 commissioner. And like he said, we walk out of that room and we hated each other. And then we went home and we got to work and figured it out. I think disagreement's absolutely fine. It makes us better. And I think for the fact that we comment about each other, we have a conversation as the four of us tomorrow. And yeah, we rub each other raw from time to time, but we do have a responsibility to work together. And I think each of us understands that responsibility.
All right. Play nice. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. We'll go to the sandbox and see what we can do.
That's Greg Sankey, SEC Commissioner. We'll take a break. We're back after this Dan Patrick Show.